"It was just a joke," she told me, and he tried to support her. But my perception of the whole episode was that I couldn't believe her. It was so real at the time, and they had no way to prove that it didn't happen, or maybe it really happened before. If I thought they had done it and I couldn't believe it was just a joke, then I could no longer live with my wife, whom I married 23 years ago. I think I'd better tell you this story so that you understand my dilemma. Flo, short for Florence, was my wife. I'm Jim. We met in college and got married shortly after graduation. We lived a normal husband and wife. We had children, a house, and a mortgage. Flo was a stay-at-home mom until the kids left home, and then she resumed her career in real estate. Flo is an attractive woman, and I'm sure she gets picked on at work sometimes. But as far as I know, she has remained faithful to me and our marriage. She sometimes has an obscene sense of humor, and I think that's what ultimately got our marriage into trouble. We had 2 children, a boy Eric and a girl Patty. At the time this happened, Eric was 21 years old and he graduated from vocational school after high school. He had his own apartment nearby and worked as an electrician. Patty was 19 years old and a sophomore at a public university, about 150 miles away. In the absence of children, we had to look forward to a happy retirement in the future, when we would have time to travel and, hopefully, grandchildren, whom we would adore. Our personal life was what I thought it was. That is, normal. We had a good relationship, honed and developed during our married life. When we first got married, we did it almost every night and day on weekends. Over time, we started doing this 2 or 3 times a week, and that was enough to make me lose the desire. And I thought that the same thing was happening with Flo. Over the years, I've learned to press all Flo's buttons to make her like everything. And when she was done, she made a strange, high-pitched sound to announce her release. It always thrilled me to realize that I had done this. And the sound of her crying was what I was aiming for in our doing this, not in achieving my own pleasure. In almost every situation, there is a fly in the ointment, and ours has appeared in the form of a new neighbor next door. Roger and his wife Alice moved into the house next door about 5 years ago, and we became friends. The problem with Roger was that he was a joker and liked to make fun of everyone he was involved with, and much to my chagrin, I was one of the favorite recipients of his jokes. Besides, what bothered me even more was that Flo enjoyed his pranks, especially if I was on the recipient side. I tried to tell her that I didn't like his jokes or her pleasure, even her concern, but she wouldn't listen and wouldn't back down. Over time, I realized that Roger was attracted to Flo, and I think he was thinking about getting to know her better. Whenever we were together, he and Flo would laugh together at his sometimes obscene jokes, while Alice and I would just smile politely at their antics. When we were in public, I know Alice was just as depressed as I was about some of the things they were doing. I remember one day on the beach, Roger was making fun of some people in a passing boat, and to my horror, Flo followed his example. Alice and I were shocked by their carelessness and scolded them to no avail as they laughed hysterically together. Shortly before the end, I began to suspect that things were getting out of control. We were at Roger and Alice's house, and Alice and I sat in the backyard while Flo followed Roger into the house to help bring out the drinks. Alice and I talked for a while until we realized that Flo and Roger had been gone for quite a while. So we went inside to look for them. When we entered the kitchen, we found it empty. But as soon as we started looking for them, they came out of the living room, hugging each other, giggling and laughing. Roger had lipstick on his collar and around his mouth, while Flo's lipstick looked smudged and her hair was disheveled. Alice and I just stood there in shock with our mouths open. "Oh, hello to you guys. I'm sorry we're taking our drinks too long, but I had to show Flo my prints," Roger spoke, seemingly oblivious to their appearance. Alice and I continued to stand there, still stunned by their obvious brazen audacity. "Roger has some wonderful prints. You know what I'm talking about, don't you, Alice?" Flo commented on this with a smirk. By this time, I had already gathered my thoughts and finally spoke. "What's going on?" I asked Flo. "How come Roger has lipstick on his face and clothes, and you look like you've been kissing?" Oh, that's because I was so happy to see Roger's prints. I must have gotten carried away. You don't mind, do you? "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep a straight face. I began to understand what was going on when I looked at their faces. Roger had a smirk on his face that comes out when he pulls one of his jokes, and Flo was looking away, so I couldn't see how hard she was trying to keep from laughing. I could feel my irritation growing. Alice was still not in the mood for what was happening when she finally spoke. "What about Roger? If you think you're going to continue a relationship with another woman in my house, you should think differently." When Roger and Flo suddenly started laughing out loud, I think Alice finally realized what was going on and smiled shyly. However, I exploded at them. "One of these days, you two will go too far, and this joke will hit the fan." "Oh, relax, honey. It's just a joke." "Come on, guys. Let me get you a drink, and we'll laugh about it together," Roger said, heading into the kitchen, followed by Flo, who was still laughing. Alice and I just shrugged and followed them, shaking our heads in disgust. "One day, Alice, they'll go too far," I predicted again. "In one of these cases, one of their jokes will return fire on them, and someone will get hurt." Alice agreed with me. When we returned to our house that night, I think Flo knew that I was still angry, especially because of her participation in the prank. "Honey, I'm really sorry," she told me. "I just get carried away sometimes. Nothing happened. I just smeared some lipstick on his face and collar and ruffled his hair. We never thought you guys would get mad. We were almost going to miss it all when you and Alice finally showed up." "Are you still mad at me? It was just a joke." "I'm trying not to get mad, Flo, but you have to stop interfering with Roger's pranks. I almost had a heart attack when I saw you looking like you were kissing him. You know how I feel about loyalty." "I know, honey. I feel the same way, and I would never do anything to hurt you." "Well, please remember that." "Okay. Hug me tight and tell me that you forgive me." A couple of weeks later, we were invited back to Roger and Alice's for dinner on Saturday night. But as soon as we finished eating, a call came in that Roger mistook for Alice. Alice worked at a local hospital as an emergency room nurse. When he hung up, he turned to Alice. "It was an emergency room. There was a serious car accident. Several people were injured. They want you to come right now." "Oh, I'll change my clothes and go." 10 minutes later, Alice was on her way to the hospital. After she left, Roger turned to me and asked if I would help him with a project in his basement while I was there. Flo was silent the whole time, her face turned away from me. I didn't think anything about it at the time, but then I remembered. "Of course. What can I do?" I asked, getting up to follow him. "Him in the basement. I want you to hold something for me while I attach it to the ceiling. It's not too heavy, but I can't hold it there and attach it at the same time, and Alice is too short to hold it." "Okay, it sounds simple." "Trust me, it is, and it will only take a minute." When we went down the stairs, he led me to a metal support post that was installed next to the stove on the floor above. He took a small metal box with a power cord hanging from it from his desk and lifted it to the ceiling between the support pipe and the stove. I noticed that Flo had followed us downstairs and was standing watching us with a smile on her face. Again, I didn't attach any importance to her presence or the strange smile. "Now, I want you to hold this here while I attach it," Roger told me. "What is it?" I asked, raising my hands to hold the box. Since Roger was standing between the pipe and the stove, I had to wrap my arms around the pipe to press it against the basement ceiling. "I'll show you in a minute, but first let me get my tools." He disappeared behind me at his desk, leaving me with a box in my hands. He came back a second or two later, and I didn't see what was in his hand until I heard 2 quick clicks when something hard and metallic squeezed my wrists. Suddenly, I realized that I had been tricked, and I was handcuffed to a pipe. I turned my head in shock to see Roger walk up to Flo and put his arm around her waist while they stood and looked at me. My mind was in turmoil, but I managed to say, "What's going on, Roger? Take these handcuffs off me." "Well, buddy, you know I can't do that. Flo says she liked my prints so much that she wants to see them again. But this time, we don't want you or Alice to be around to watch." With that, he and Flo turned and walked back up the stairs from the basement. Flo walked and swayed her hips exaggeratedly. "Let me go. You're going too far this time, Roger, and you're going to regret it if you don't let me go right now." "Just calm down a little, darling. I just want to look at some prints," Flo said as they disappeared from sight, laughing and giggling. As I struggled with the handcuffs, trying to figure out if there was any way to get free, I realized the hopelessness of my situation. The pipe was embedded in the concrete floor below and bolted to a steel IBM above. Listening, I could see them moving into the master bedroom directly above me, and I heard Flo giggling. The shoes fell on the carpet above me, and I heard Flo exclaim, "Oh, how nice and big he is. More than Jim's. Hurry up and take off these clothes, Flo." My rage grew by the minute as I continued to struggle madly with the handcuffs. "Come on, do it. Flo, you're so hot. Let me do this. Oh my God, it feels so good. That's it. It's so nice." I heard the bed start to creak above me and imagined them doing it. I cursed the handcuffs and my unfaithful spouse over my head. My wrists were raw and bleeding as I continued to twitch and squirm in the handcuffs. My mind was in a whirl of emotions when I heard the sounds Roger was making. Then there was silence upstairs for a few minutes. I stopped resisting and just lay on the hard cement floor with my arms wrapped around the pipe. I felt a terrible sadness in my heart when I finally heard Flo's exclamation. "Oh, that was a really good Roger. Someday I'll have to see your prints again. I think we should get dressed and go downstairs to see how Jim is doing." "Okay, Flo. I need to rest for a minute. But Alice should be back soon after that fake call I sent her, and I don't want her to see me in bed with you." A few minutes later, I heard footsteps on the stairs to the basement, but did not look up when they came to the place where I was lying. "Look at his wrists. They're all covered in blood." "Honey, it was just a joke. Nothing happened." "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Hurry up, Roger. Unlock the handcuffs so we can bandage his wrists." Oh my God. I never thought he would take it so personally. I looked up at them, tears streaming down my face as Roger fumbled with the handcuffed key. "Roger, you'd better give Flo this key before you unlock me and then run. When I'm free, I'll make you regret the day you were born." Roger looked at my face and silently handed the key to Flo. He started to move towards the stairs, looking at me with fear as Flo began to unlock the handcuffs. When she finally took off the handcuffs, I heard Roger's truck start up and the screech of tires as it pulled away. Standing up, I looked down at Flo, still squatting on the floor, and there was an expression of fear on her face. "You better find another place to stay tonight, or I could cause you serious physical harm, and you'd better call before you try to come home." Tears were streaming down her face now as she began to realize the enormity of the pain she had caused me. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. It was just a joke. We haven't done anything." "Flo, I never want to hear this nonsense about it being a joke again. As for me, my perception is that you did it, and that's all that matters right now. From now on, I'm going to act like you cheated and cuckolded me. You can expect a call from my lawyer in a few days. We're done," I exclaimed, turning and heading up the stairs. "No, Jim, please." "Nothing happened," she howled at me from the basement floor. "What will I tell the children?" I didn't answer and headed for the front door. Just as I was getting into my car, a very crazy Alice turned into their driveway. "Where is my stupid husband?" "There was no accident, and I wasn't needed in the ambulance," she exclaimed as she got out of the car. Suddenly, she noticed my wrists. "What's the matter, Jim? Dear God, look at your wrists. Let me bandage them for you." "Roger and Flo have come up with another joke, Alice. This time they've gone too far, and I'm divorcing Flo." "Good God, what have they done?" "You can hear it from Flo and Roger. I'm heading home and I'll do the dressing myself when I get there. You can tell my ex-wife that she will find her clothes and things on the porch. If she wants to come back to our house, she'd better get a court order." "Oh my God, what have they done? What did they do?" Alice screamed frantically, hurrying into the house. I got in the car and drove home, still fuming inside. When I got home, I thoroughly washed my wrists with antibacterial soap, applied antibiotic ointment, and bandaged them as best I could. Then I methodically began packing Flo's rags, cosmetics, and other personal items into plastic trash bags and putting them on the porch. The phone rang while I was working, but I refused to answer it or even check the caller ID. When I was done, I locked the door, undressed, and lay down on the bed. Despite the fact that I was emotionally and physically destroyed, I couldn't sleep for a long time. When I woke up in the morning, the phone rang again, but I refused to take the call. I got up, took a shower, and had breakfast. Then he replaced the bandages on his wrists. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and I looked out to see Alice standing in the doorway. Opening it, I motioned her inside. "Well, they really did it this time, didn't they?" she said, coming in. I'm afraid so." "What are you going to do?" As I told her, I'm divorcing her. "But they say that nothing happened. It was just one of their jokes." "My perception is that they did it. And as far as I understand, this is reality. I'll make an appointment with a divorce lawyer first thing Monday morning," I told her calmly. "You're really angry, aren't you? Can't you wait until you cool down before you decide to do something so drastic? You've been investing in each other for almost 24 years. Do you want to give it up without trying to make an attempt to save at least something?" "I'm not going to be cuckolded. I've said this to Flo many times, and as far as I understand, she cuckolded me, and now it's over. But they claim that nothing happened. They just made noises as if it really happened." "I do not know if this has happened. It's just their words. It was as if it could have happened, and they have no way to prove that it didn't happen. So I have to agree with my perception that this really happened. She didn't respect me at all. Can't you leave everything as it is and go to a consultation? Flo is just terribly upset about it. I warned her about this kind of thing last time, but she didn't listen. I'm done talking. We'll just let the lawyers handle it. If you're happy with Roger's role in this, then you can continue to live with him, but don't count on me. Just tell Roger that he'd better stay away from me in the future. I haven't decided what to do with Roger yet, but I really hate to see you guys break up over this. Roger is very remorseful about all this and wants me to convey his sincere apologies to you. Make sure he understands that our friendship is over. As much as I'd like to stay friends with you, Alice, I think it would be better if we didn't see each other anymore while you're staying with him. Is there anything I can say to Flo that might give her some hope that you'll forgive her? If she can prove to me that she didn't have it with Roger, I'll think about it. And I don't take Roger or her word for it that nothing happened, and it was just a joke. I feel like it happened, and that's why it happened." "All right, Jim, I'll tell her. I'm going to miss you." "I'm going to miss you too, Alice. Now, let me load her things into your car, and you can take them to her. I assume you still have it. She's moving in with her sister this afternoon." Her sister lived on the other side of town. She was a widow and lived alone, so there would be a place for Flo, perhaps indefinitely. After loading Flo's bags into Alice's car, I waved to her as she drove away and then returned to the house. The first thing I did was look for a locksmith's number to change the locks in the house. I suddenly realized that if I left for work on Monday and Flo returned to the house and changed the locks, I would end up on the street. I arranged to change the locks on the same day, and then pulled the plug on my phone and left my cell phone off. I spent the whole day doing housework until the locksmith came. After he left, I got in my car and headed to the local supermarket, where I bought some frozen dinners to eat for a week or so, and then returned to my lonely house. I really missed Flo after almost 24 years of living together, but I couldn't get rid of my anger at her and what she and Roger had done to me. That evening, around 7:30 a.m., I was watching TV when the doorbell rang. Looking out the window, I saw Flo's sister, Mary, standing at the front door. "Hi, Mary," was my greeting. I opened the door to let her in. "Hi, Jim. Can I take a few minutes from you?" "Of course, Mary. Come in." We went into the living room. She sat down, and I sat in an armchair and asked if she wanted something to drink. A Coke would be quite enough." I got her 1 and 1 for myself and went back to the living room. "I suppose you know what's going on," she said, taking a sip of her drink. "Yes. Are you going to ask me to take her back? If that's the case, then you shouldn't have come." "No. She told me all about it. How are your wrists?" "They're scabbing now, and everything should be fine. I don't see any signs of infection." Flo will be glad to hear that. You know she's almost ready for a nervous breakdown, especially since you don't want to talk to her. And that's why I'm here. To send a message. Rather, more than one message. I will listen to your messages, but I promise nothing in return. First of all, she loves you very much and is very sorry for what she did. Okay, is there anything else? She wants you to know that she's willing to take a lie detector test to prove that she's not lying when she says nothing happened to Roger or anyone else. That's the only proof she can offer you. It was a new opportunity that I hadn't thought of, and I thought about it for a few minutes while Mary stared at me intently, continuing to sip her Coke. It sounds normal to me, but I want to set some conditions. First of all, the results proving that she didn't have it with Roger doesn't mean that I'll take her back. Secondly, Roger would have to take the same test, and his test results would have to match hers. Thirdly, I need the approval of the person who conducts the tests and questions. And fourthly, I will not pay for the tests. That sounds reasonable to me, Jim. But can't you be more confident that you'll take her back if the test results show they're not lying? No. She hurt me deeply, and even if I get her back, it will be a long time before I forgive her. All right, Jim. I'll give her your terms. I'm really sorry about that. I wanted to be mad at her for her stupidity when she showed up at my place this afternoon, but she was such a pathetic sight that I don't believe anything I could have said would have made her feel any worse. She knows that she did a very stupid thing and also caused you terrible pain. I'm going to have to give her some pills to get her to sleep tonight. I also want to tell you that she called your children and told them what she had done. I think they were a little offended with her, as she hadn't stopped crying since. She talked to them. Well, I better go back and deliver your message. Thanks for the Coke. All right, Mary. Thanks for coming all the way here. I appreciate your concern. After she left, I sat down to think about the situation. Some of my initial anger had cooled down a bit, and now I could think more clearly about what I wanted. I decided to have a drink first and went to the office where my drinks cabinet was, poured a glass half filled with scotch, and then went to the kitchen to add an ice cube. Without returning to my seat, I wandered around the house, looking at all the things that were memories of our married life together. Did I really want to end this? The doorbell roused me from my reverie and memories. Looking out the window, I saw our daughter Patty standing at the front door, looking obviously unhappy. Oh, I thought. She had just discovered that the locks had been replaced and her key was not working. After opening the door, Patty immediately went inside, giving me a hostile look. "What's with the locks, Dad? And why aren't you answering your phone?" I had to drive 150 miles to find out what was going on. "I'm sorry, Patty. I didn't want to talk to your mother. I heard from your Aunt Mary that she told you what she did." "Yes. And I'm really mad at you for kicking her out, just because of a joke. Can't you forgive her and let her come home?" When she called me to tell me what she had done, I realized that she had been a complete fool. "Patty, it was more than just a joke, and I warned her earlier that I didn't like the way she and our friend Roger were continuing their jokes, but she wasn't listening. I couldn't get too much out of my mom on the phone, but I understand that it was just a joke. What was so bad about it?" I continued to talk about what had happened. I started by telling her about the smudged lipstick joke they had earlier and about our subsequent discussions. Then I told her about the fucking joke, rolled up my sleeves, and showed her the scars on my wrists. "Oh, Daddy, this is terrible. Was that when you kicked her out?" "Yes, they may have had it. It really sounded like they were talking because I know the sounds your mom makes when she does it. Either that or they're very good actors. I understand that they did it, and this is my reality until she can prove otherwise. I asked your mother to take a lie detector test and ask Roger to take it. If the test results are confirmed, I'll have to believe her. But she hurt me so much, and the fact that she thought I'd put up with being a wimp and a cuckold and laugh out loud at their so-called joke. Maybe I still won't be able to live with her again. I'm really sorry about all this, Dad. I hope that you and Mom can handle this, because I love you both, despite what she did. I'm trying to achieve this, baby, because I really miss your mom, but I still can't accept her disrespect for me. Okay, Daddy, I guess I can't ask for more. Now that I know what happened, I'm going to visit my mom and see if I can calm her down. I'll probably spend the night at Aunt Mary's, and I have to go back to school tomorrow. Please turn on your phone so I can get in touch with you. And I know Eric wants to talk to you too. I'll call him and let him know what's going on. He's at that job upstate and tried to call you after Mom called him. Okay, baby. I'll turn the phones back on as soon as you leave. Give me a hug." I hugged her and hugged her to me. She looked so much like her mother that it was scary sometimes, and I loved her very much. She has always been my child. "Bye, Daddy," she said to me, opening her car door. I waved at her as she turned off the driveway and headed up the street. Then I went back to my lonely drink, turning on my phones again. A couple of days after Flo's sister, Mary, visited me. She called me and told me that Flo had agreed to my conditions for a lie detector test, and she persuaded Roger to agree to it too. Roger agreed to pay for his own test to show his remorse for participating in the prank. Mary also gave me the name and phone number of the test administrator. My anger at Flo for participating in the joke had cooled somewhat, but I felt so depressed that if she loved me and didn't do it with Roger, how could she participate in such a humiliating joke on me? I was slowly coming to the conclusion that maybe her love for me had passed, despite her protests about wanting to get back together with me. It can come down to a simple decision, whether I want a loveless marriage if the tests prove that it did not happen. Flo tried to call me several times, but I just hung up when I heard her voice. After that, all her communication with me went through her sister, and I received daily calls from her, mostly about how sorry Flo was and how she wanted to come home. But I kept telling them that I wouldn't make a decision until the lie detector tests were passed. Around this time, our son, Eric, started calling me, begging me to forgive his mother and let her come home. I tried to explain what happened and why it was so hard for me because of his mother's actions, but he couldn't understand my pain and kept insisting that I let her come home. I realized that I could end up in an estranged relationship with my son if it turns out that we divorced. It was some comfort to know that our daughter, Patty, understood better what I was going through and was more supportive of me. After receiving information from Mary about the name of the test administrator, I called several friends involved in legal and police matters and found out that this guy was often used by the police, and I was assured that he would conduct an impartial test. After calling, I made an appointment with him the next day. I found out that Flo and Roger had already contacted him, and he had scheduled a test for each of them in 2 days. They both listed my name as an interested party with the authority to control the questions being asked. The next day, I explained to my boss that I needed some personal time and went down to the office of the test administrators. His name was Jack Harlan, and I explained to him what the problem was, and I needed to solve it with his testing to determine if Flo and Roger were doing it or not. We discussed the questions he would ask, and he told me that he would ask the same questions to both Flo and Roger, compare the answers he received from both of them, and give me a final written report. He agreed that if the test results for both jokers matched, it would give confidence that there was no bed. If that wasn't the case, I probably would never have been able to trust her again, and divorce was inevitable. If the test showed that they were both lying, I could immediately start divorce proceedings. As far as I could tell, it wasn't difficult. I went back to work feeling more confident that I would soon figure out if the bed was involved. However, deep down I knew that difficult decisions were coming. For the next 3 days, I went to work as usual and stayed late so as not to return to an empty house. I ate at a nearby diner, and when I got home, I drank whiskey and then lay down in my empty bed. It was difficult to fall asleep. I really missed Flo, the warmth and love she brought to our marriage before the jokes started. On the morning of the test, I felt insecure. All that was needed was a clear lie detector test report, and I would welcome Flo home with the confidence that after my reaction to their last joke scared her, I would never be the subject of any silly jokes again. This lasted until the phone rang at a little after 10. "Jim, this is Alice. I found something that you really need to see. Roger is at the testing center. Can you come right now?" The tone of her voice did not bode well, so I quickly headed for the house next door. According to our custom, I walked right through the front door and heard Alice shout that she was in the study. I walked in and saw that she was sitting at her desktop computer. There was a worried expression on her face. "Jim, I want you to see something." I pulled a chair closer. "Jim, Roger has been acting a little secretive since Tuesday. A couple of times I passed by this door, and he hastily minimized something on the monitor. In addition, he sometimes leaves the room when he is on the phone. Yesterday, I'm pretty sure he was on the phone with Flo. I just had my first chance to look into our computer without it in the house." With these words, Alice clicked on the Google icon at the bottom of the screen, after which the application opened. I do not know if Roger understands that if you do not delete them, all Google searches will be saved. This is the story of his search since Tuesday. My blood froze in my veins when I read some of what had been researched. There were 4 different options on the topic, how to cheat a lie detector test. Alice and I sat side by side and for the next 30 minutes and read many of the pages that Alice's husband was looking through. When we had read enough, we retired to her living room and discussed what we thought it all meant. We were still talking when we heard Roger's car pull up outside. Soon, the front door opened and he entered. He looked at me warily, muttered a greeting, then walked over to the couch opposite Alice and me before sitting down. If I hadn't been watching him, I might not have noticed the slight limp when he limped on his left leg. That was the only answer I needed. "Rog, I believe you passed the test with flying colors. To tell the truth, I was pretty sure that nothing had happened that day anyway." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alice give me a puzzled look. Roger returned before I could tell her about my plan. "If you're willing to swear that you and Flo will never pull any tricks again while you're alive, I'm ready to come over and shake your hand to put all this behind you. I probably won't even bother reading the report." His face showed great relief, and he readily gave me his word that he would swear. Smiling, I got up and walked towards him. He rose slowly to meet me. Extending my right hand, I took another step and stood firmly on his right foot. Such a movement should have caused slight discomfort, Instead, the blood drained from his face before he let out a chilling scream, throwing his body back onto the sofa. In desperation, he pulled his foot out from under mine with both hands before ripping off his shoe. Alice and I watched as the shoe finally came off. We could see blood dripping from his sock. He was still moaning. A sideways glance at Alice told me that she was embarrassed by the blood. I continued to watch her face, smiling, when I saw the penny drop, and she made the connection between what we had read earlier and the wound on Roger's leg. I won't bother reading the report, because I know it will be complete nonsense. Did that nail you drove into your shoe when you pressed it while answering their security questions help to hide your lies? It had to happen, didn't it? The pain on Roger's face eased a little, replaced by an expression of despair as he looked from me to Alice. Yes, I did cheat, and I told Flo how to do it. But not for the reason you think, dude. Really, let's hear it, Alice. It should be good. Alice and I sat down again, and Roger gently pressed on the sole to stop the bleeding. I looked at Alice and saw her frowning at the mess he had made on the floor. I thought about suggesting to her that she make him clean the carpet with his tongue. To give him his due, Roger didn't seem to think what to say to spin this new development. We didn't know what questions you asked the guy. What's so difficult about the question? Did you two sleep? I interrupted him. Yes. I know that we both would have passed it with honor, but we were afraid that you would slip into something more subtle. For example, well, has our behavior always been such that it passes the matrimony test? At that moment, Alice angrily intervened in the conversation. And the answer to that question was obviously a big fat no. Otherwise, why would you bother sticking a damn nail in your shoe before the test? I'm guessing that the fact that you came with the nail still inside means that you forgot to bring your spare shoes or a set of pliers. You've never been good at thinking ahead, have you? Please, honey. I didn't want to lose you, and Flo certainly didn't want to lose Jim. So, my dear husband, when and what did you do that would not pass the marriage test? Roger shifted in his chair and answered in a very low voice. It was that day. We just wanted to pretend that we were doing something upstairs. I was lying on my back and Flo straddled me. As you can imagine, we were both fully clothed, he added hastily. We bounced up and down to make the bed creak. And I don't even remember who started it, but how? I ended up rubbing her under her skirt. We both did it for real. We were so stupid. I was a little confused. I'm a good judge of character, and it smacked of truthfulness. If that wasn't the case, then Roger was extremely good at making up excuses on the fly. I looked at Alice. Is that good enough for you? No, by no means. This couple has proven that they are such consummate liars and schemers that I am not even remotely satisfied. Roger, put some antiseptic on your leg, tie it up, and then I think you'd better leave. I need to think about something, not to mention clean up another one of your lovely messes, Alice snapped, pointing to a stain on the carpet at Roger's foot. If Roger wasn't a fantastic actor, the look of horror on his face indicated that he was incredibly worried about the future of his marriage. He blurted out, I have a video. Alice. What? My question sounded almost simultaneously. What video? We sounded like a sick version of two people singing in harmony. I installed a video camera in our bedroom before we handcuffed you in the basement. I filmed it all. I beat Alice to the punch. Then why didn't you say that a few days ago? Roger didn't need to answer that question. If the video showed them touching each other, even fully clothed, it would not be something that two spouses desperately trying to reconcile with their partners would want to make public. For example, I firmly believe that the boundary of infidelity runs far beyond the real bed. Any form of intimacy, even a kiss on the lips, would be overstepping the bounds. I wanted to, but Flo thought you'd freak out. We told Roger to bandage his leg and then showed us the video. While he was out of the room, I sent Flo a message. I couldn't resist hammering a nail into her coffin of fear. Take the nail out of your shoe and come to Alice's house. Roger is going to show us the video. It's usually about a minute's walk from Mary's house to ours, but it took a good 35 minutes before there was a knock on the door. Alice opened it and let Flo and her sister Mary in. Flo's makeup was ruined, and her eyes were red. Mary explained that my wife panicked as soon as she read my message and realized that I had caught her playing nails. Flo didn't look nearly as calm about the test results as Roger did when he first came home. Mary just looked at me and raised her eyebrows at Flo's further self-destructive behavior. Flo tried to hug me, but I sat her down on the couch next to me. She continued to look at my face, I suppose, to understand how I was feeling. I wondered if Mary had any idea what was on the video. Alice and I didn't sit idly by during those 35 minutes. Our conversation revolved around what we would most likely do if the video turned out to be exactly what Roger said. Alice had already decided that she would probably forgive Roger for letting the situation in the bedroom get out of control. That is, after letting him cook for a while. I was more ambivalent. My emotional reflex was that my wife betrayed me, which, as I always swore, was unforgivable. However, my logic circuits were calmer. Flo has been a model wife for 24 years, and our children have already made it clear that they will be devastated if I don't forgive her. A minute after everyone had settled in, Roger appeared with his laptop. A used flash drive was sticking out of one port, and a cable was sticking out of the other. He put the computer next to the TV and turned it on. It seemed strange to me that he just didn't put the USB stick in the TV. But then I remembered Alice telling me that he wasn't that tech savvy. As soon as the image on the computer screen matched the image on the TV, Roger muttered another apology and pressed the play button. Flo was looking away from everyone else in the room and the TV. She knew my position on fidelity, and it must have been a terribly awkward situation for her. Mary stared at the screen intently as if she had no idea what was going to happen. Roger looked more relaxed again. He sat down next to Alice and tried to grab her hand, but she pulled it away. The clip only lasted about 10 minutes and pretty much showed what Roger had already described. It was almost completely unlike a bed. A few seconds after it all started, both main characters appeared. Fully dressed, as Roger said, Flo turned him over on his back, then straddled him, returning to the camera and saying word for word what I heard when I was handcuffed in the basement. We saw that it was Roger who started the game with his hands, but he was only a few seconds ahead of Flo. It was very difficult for me to observe this for several reasons. Firstly, because no man with any self-esteem and outside of a set of crazy cuckolds wants to watch his wife with another guy in such a situation. Secondly, it caused me ugly post-traumatic stress when I heard the words that had so devastated me less than a week ago again. It made my wrists burn and throb in memory of my helplessness to prevent what was happening in the room above me. About halfway through, I closed my eyes and tried to block out the noise. I didn't open my eyes again until the silence that followed their mutual climaxes filled the room. The silence has never seemed so loud and pervasive. Judging by the silence in the room, even the normal sounds of breathing could not be heard. I was not alone in my feelings. I stared at the screen, seeing Flo and Roger split up very quickly before leaving the camera's field of view. The video stopped, showing an empty bed. The complete silence in the room lasted for several unpleasant seconds after the clip ended. Mary looked at Flo with disgust. Roger looked at Alice hopefully. Flo focused on the stain on the floor in the corner. The silence was broken by Alice, who jumped to her feet, followed quickly by Roger. "You're a smelly, unfaithful woman." The words of the petite nurse were shocking. The worst thing I've ever heard her say in the past was cursed. Roger was certainly shocked, judging by the expression on his face. The crack when her open palm touched his cheek was like a gunshot. She was foaming at the mouth. I can honestly say that I've never seen someone so angry. But, honey, don't you dare touch me, you treacherous little traitor. Roger ducked and thus avoided a second slap in the face. He grimaced, shifting his weight onto his right leg. He looked confused. The whole video was terrible. But why? We invited Jim and Flo in the late afternoon, didn't we? We were going to sit outside on the patio, weren't we? Don't you remember, dear? Alice asked, although it sounded more like a growl. But we decided to spend it indoors because it had been raining all day. Do you remember now? Roger still looked confused, but nodded in agreement with what Alice was saying. Alice pointed furiously at the TV screen. Look at this, you fool. Sunlight is pouring through the window. It was filmed not only on a sunny day, but also in the morning. This window loses direct sunlight before noon. You fabricated the whole story, didn't you? Roger's face lost its confused expression and assumed an expression of horror. That was all I needed to admit their guilt. The sudden mental shift from considering forgiveness to an irreconcilable solution was embarrassing, and I hate being embarrassed. I could, and in fact, agreed that there might have been a good reason for cheating on a lie detector test. There was only one reason they faked the video. The next few seconds were very tense. Flo groaned loudly and ran out the door. Mary just sat there stunned. Alice moved towards Roger, who tried to get past me to use me as a shield. I took one step and put my foot down on his injured leg with all my strength. Instinctively, he doubled over. When his head reached an almost horizontal position, it met my knee going the other way. His head jerked up again, blood spurting from his flattened nose. He joined Flo in a headlong flight away from home. The three of us were trapped in a terrible picture. Alice stood trembling, tears rolling down her face. I knew exactly how she felt. For the second time in a week, the man I loved unconditionally for almost a quarter of a century tore my heart to shreds. That it was the same person who had given me hope in between episodes was doubly overwhelming. Mary continued to sit and stare at the TV screen, I suppose stunned by her sister's stupidity. Stupid, and, if I'm any judge, horrified by the lies Flo has no doubt told her over the past week. I went over to Alice and hugged her. I held her while she was trembling uncontrollably because of the end of her marriage. Me. I've always preferred to grieve in private. I would have done it later. Here and now, I was cold, clinically calm, as it happens in a crisis, and I had already begun to make a list of questions and lines of investigation. And I was already beginning to regret that I had allowed Roger to leave with only a broken nose. I looked at Mary, wondering why she stayed. Was it to apologize for her involvement in all this once we were settled? Was it the inability to take her eyes off the contemplation of the train wreck right in front of her? Or should we have waited until we calmed down to stand up for her sister again? Unable to answer this question without breaking contact with Alice, and having no intention of doing so, I let my mind drift at high speed. That Roger was quite intelligent, a skilled manipulator, and a good actor was now obvious. Although he didn't seem to be as smart as Alice, if she hadn't noticed the hint of sunlight, we would probably still be part of two successful couples even now. Looking back, it can be said that the remade video was inspired. I still had a hard time reconciling it with the fact that I was pretending. I would bet my life that the soundtrack matched the words I heard that weekend. The inevitable logical conclusion that confidence led to fit exactly into the same slot in my mind, like the penultimate piece of a puzzle. Either they duplicated the old soundtrack with new visual frames, or they copied the words and sounds in real time. Both scripts were based on the fact that they recorded their actions during the original episode. Suddenly, Roger's actions, playing the file through his laptop, made sense. After hugging Alice one last time, I put her down on the couch and went over to the laptop. Thank God he hasn't gone into sleep mode yet, which would require a password to restore access to. Stupid, I thought to myself. If that were the case, I could just look at the flash drive on another device. Obviously, my brain was also clouded by everything that happened. With my fingers dancing over the keys and the mouse, I closed the video playback software to be presented on the Explorer screen, which informed us that we had just watched me and Flo shooting 8. There were also files marked from 2 to 7. Against the background of the others, 2 more files stood out like flags. One was called me and Flo, the original. The other was called The Basement. I double-clicked on the last one, then slid along the progress bar about 3/4 of the way. There I was again, suspended from that bar in the damn basement, filmed by an obviously hidden camera. I closed the clip. There are too many bad memories. The file marked original was much larger than the subsequent ones. After glancing at Alice and receiving her nod of approval, I pressed this button. It overlooked Roger in Alice's bedroom. The view was different than in the 8 videos, and it made me run down the hall to that room to compare the 2 views. Half a minute of detective work led me to the conclusion that the original camera was probably hidden on a bookshelf, while subsequent versions were most likely shot from a camera mounted on a tripod at the foot of the bed. When I returned to the living room, the small counter at the bottom of the screen showed 1 minute 5, with more than an hour to go. Roger obviously didn't know how to edit either. I jumped 20 minutes to the end, then advanced at 30-second intervals until the action began. After going back half a minute, I sat down on the couch next to Alice and grabbed her hand for support, both for myself and for her. Let's just say that the original version was very different from the subsequent ones. The only thing they had in common was that it all started with Flo pushing Roger on his back. About 25 seconds later, I heard Alice and Mary gasp in unison. Because of the angle at which the video was shot, Flo's face was visible on it as she turned her head to the side and looked down and to the left of the camera. In other words, to a grate at floor level, which opened into a channel through which the sounds on which their joke was based were transmitted to the basement below, the basement where I was held captive. Flo's expression, the one that made the 2 ladies gasp, was disgusting. My wife knew perfectly well what was going on in my head in the basement that night, and she loved it. My own ever-loving wife took pleasure in mentally tormenting me. I was fighting a strong urge to vomit. When Roger saw on the screen where Flo's gaze was focused, he grinned maliciously. Too shocked to check the time, but it must have been a few seconds later. We all watched as Roger turned Flo onto her back. As he knelt next to her, fumbling with his belt and trousers, Flo lifted her skirt on the screen and tore off her clothes, throwing them towards an invisible fireplace. The rest of the video reproduced pretty much what I imagined while in the basement. Looking back wisely, I think it was Flo's brutal enjoyment of the situation that emboldened Roger and spurred on the subsequent sequence of events. Having said that, if I were a gambler, I'd bet money that this was the first time for Roger and Flo, and the video certainly showed that what started as a relatively innocent situation quickly spiraled out of control. I was pretty sure Roger knew that he enjoyed watching the other person humiliate, but it was likely that Flo had stumbled upon her kink that day. After the show ended, Mary asked me if Flo and I had a future. I could tell from her behavior that she wasn't optimistic. I stopped for at least a minute to sort out my feelings. No, not in this life, Mary. Ironically, if Flo had come to me afterwards and said that it all started as a joke, but got out of control, as it looked in the original video, then maybe I would have thought about forgiving her. But no. She and this guy conspired to falsify the story and cheat on the lie detector test. This is a level of deception that I didn't even think she was capable of. Makes me wonder how well I know her. What else did she deceive me about? Besides, we haven't seen all the workout videos yet. After her initial gaffe, she returned and at least made contact with Roger once more. I'm sorry, Mary, but it's over between us. Mary nodded grimly. Please don't destroy her publicly, Jim. It would only humiliate your children. If you give me a copy of the video, I'll calmly explain it to Mom and Dad, Flo, and even your children if necessary. I nodded and thanked her. She left sadly, but with a determined expression on her face. Alice has already opened the phone book in the legal section. Alice and I have been comforting each other for weeks. However, it was clear that any relationship is doomed to bad memories, and we parted as friends. I was leaving her house late one night after comforting her once again when I ran into an angry Roger in her front yard. How could he ever hope to reconcile with Alice when I was seeing her 5 times a week? What nonsense! After looking around for potential witnesses, I took great pleasure in breaking his nose again. I was very proud of myself for not doing worse to anyone. The memory of that sadistic grin on his face, just before he ended my marriage, would be provocation enough. Alice ended up practically crucifying him in the divorce. When he demanded his share of the assets, she, with my full blessing, threatened that I would charge him with unlawful restriction of liberty, using the video of me in the basement as evidence. He reduced his losses and disappeared soon after. Just as well. I must have been bluffing. Maybe I could have brushed off the public humiliation of myself. And I didn't care about Flo's image, but I didn't want to embarrass my children or Flo's extended family. Shortly after I smashed the asshole's nose, about a week after the video session, I received a message from Flo in which she wondered if the fact that I hadn't released the clip for her children, family, and friends meant that she and I had a chance in the future. The fact that she was referring to only one clip told me that she didn't know that I had seen the original. She probably assumed that Roger wouldn't be stupid enough to leave all the clips on one stick. The message also reminded me that I didn't send clips to Mary. I didn't hear anything about my children that week, but given the egocentrism of young people, was it a surprise? It also implied that Mary and Flo didn't communicate. Maybe it was because Mary was angry, or maybe it was because Flo was too embarrassed. I called Mary to confirm that she was still okay to get the video. She was fine. It was during the same conversation that I found out that Flo had returned to her parents. When I copied take 8, as well as the original on DVD, I remembered that I hadn't actually watched take 2-7. Then I did so. In between, they turned all the remaining soft or forgiving parts of my heart into unyielding concrete. Take 2 was much closer to the original than to their sanitized ideal. They started reading the script and doing the whole thing like a dressed cowgirl. But they lost control again, tore off their clothes, and started. Copulate like animals. Takes 3 to 5 were serious attempts to do everything right, but ended prematurely when one or the other of them started giggling or left the script. Take 6 was the worst. I do not know if Roger forgot to turn off the camera or not, but after an interrupted workout in clothes, he told Flo that he had a surprise for her. He left the room and returned with something that he inserted into the back of the TV in the bedroom. I realized pretty soon that it was an SD card from a camera in the basement. Grabbing the remote, Roger must have pressed the play button. I couldn't see the screen since it was level with the camera, but I heard enough of the soundtrack to make sure there was no doubt. To say that they both lost control would be a gross understatement. The same disgusting expression appeared on their faces that was on Flo's face in the original version. Again, neither lasted long. After they both fell back on the bed, Flo started scolding him. After she cleans up, they won't have time to get the video right before Alice has to come home. And judging by what Roger told her about Alice's to-do list, they only had the next morning to fix everything. They were betrayed by the morning sun on their next attempt. All this from a woman who behaved distraught towards her husband, children, and sister. I almost canceled the deal and copied the clip to everyone in Flo's address book, before I calmed down and realized how it would affect my children. I went in search of Roger, but by that time he had already left town. No, Flo won't be forgiven, and unfortunately, Roger won't have a third broken nose. I sent all the clips to Mary with the note that if I get information from someone about my mistreatment of Flo, I will post the entire video. She must have done a good job because one by one Flo's parents, Eric and Patty, called to tell me that they understood why my marriage broke up. Later, I found out that Mary had told them the whole story and offered to show the clips as proof. Flo's mother was the only one who accepted her offer, hardly believing the story. Apparently, she threw up in the middle of the original clip. After that, Flo did not resist the divorce. Through Mary, I learned that she had escaped the toxic atmosphere in her parents' house by renting a small apartment. Flo did send me a sincere letter apologizing for her behavior and attempted cover-up. The loneliness she felt screamed from the pages. She begged for forgiveness, but only to come to terms with herself. Her pleas for me to forgive her, for the sake of her parents, our children, and mutual friends almost brought me to tears. Almost. I haven't looked for a replacement for her yet, but there has been no shortage of single ladies vying for my attention. Ask any middle-aged woman about the availability of suitable, decent-looking men with good morals, and she will paint a gloomy picture. I'm looking forward to meeting them again, and since I'm not going to get married anymore, I think there will be a lot of such meetings.